American University in Bulgaria.
We can start today's talk, which is part of the Entrepreneurship Startup program that we're running at AUBG, and I'm extremely happy to have with you here Pavel Ezekiev and Steve Keil, who agreed to come and deliver this wonderful presentation we have been looking for at least a year. So let me tell you who you're very briefly, of course, who the speakers of today's events are. Pavel Ezekiev is the founding partner and manager of NEVEQ Venture Capital Fund, and his fund specializes in the IT sector. Steve Keil is the founder and the person behind MammothDB, and he is the first person in Bulgaria, the first CEO who was able to send an IT company signed to a foreign company, VMware, so he has some traction in entrepreneurship and business creation, also in living in Bulgaria for a while. So let me give a very warm welcome to Steve and Pavel.
All right, so Pavel's going to start, and what Pavel's going to do is give you a perspective of sort of the macroeconomics globally and also regionally from a VC point of view. Next, he's going to give you a bit of an example of like a case study of some investments NEVEQ has done and the criteria and sort of ideas that go behind those investments. And he'll flip it off to me, and I'm going to give it to you from the entrepreneur's point of view. So I'll try to give you my view as an entrepreneur of the venture environment, startups, and what that means for us. And then if we have time, I'm going to, as usual, try to challenge you a bit on what you could do in that environment to thrive. Sound okay? And then we have a lot of Q&A. All right, cool. You can clip it on if you want.
Thank you, Steve. So, and thank you, Vanetta, for the invitation, first and foremost. I'm wearing a sweatshirt, just to make sure everybody sees it. This is not random. I'm not a student, but I have a very special affiliation with the school. I love the school, and I'm very happy to be able to help out Vanetta on this occasion. How do we start? I think first lesson, the relationship between the venture capital guy and the entrepreneur is expressed that while the entrepreneur is doing something important, the venture capital guy is trying to serve him water, chocolates. Why you hide the chocolates? Eat some of the chocolates while the venture guy, eat some of the chocolates while the entrepreneur is trying to figure out how to extract more money or a bigger valuation. And ultimately try to prove the rest of the world that what it takes to build a real business and take it global you don't really have to dress up in a suit. So we didn't have to do that today. But you can actually, and then try to fit the standard definition of a venture capital guy, which is, I think, you've probably seen it in different YouTubes, and those of you who've been to the Silicon Valley, they walk around in hacky pants or sweatpants and sneakers. So that is what my team and I are trying to do here in Bulgaria, which is to bring the culture of venture investing straight to Bulgaria. I think it's fair to say that we were probably the first team who tried to do that in a fairly institutional way 5 years ago. And I think the story will more or less be about how this is going and what happened and what didn't happen and what are the lessons and what are the practical lessons for you. I think my objective would be to try to make it easy for you to ask the question, can I start a business here or in fact anywhere I am? What does it take to start a business? How do you know if you should start a business? Is it for you or not? What are the mistakes to avoid? And at the end of the day, maybe one or two very, very practical advices. If you wanted to start on Monday morning next week, what do you do? So I believe there are some graphs and slides somewhere. This represents the venture fundraising. No, this represents, first of all, the investment climate today. So I think this was the first thing Vanette asked me to show you, is what is happening to the investment climate today. And for those of you who hear in marketing, forecasting, and risk management classes that risk is about managing uncertainty in the future, the fact that 2013 is missing from this graph is a sheer statement to the fact that we don't know. We just don't know. So I think we can spend a lot of time trying to make an estimate, an educated guess on what the future holds. I believe most people who are in the business of forecasting what the future holds financially and economically are today very reluctant to make statements, and the statements are broadly narrowed down to we don't know, or it's going to be very slow, or it's going to be a curve or a W or a double dip or a triple dip or whatever, which essentially to us means relatively nothing, because at the end of the day, the ability of someone to forecast and to really be able to take a guess on what is coming is entirely based on their own experiences of how many crises they have been into, how they have managed those crises, how they have managed the shortage of capital, competition, teams falling apart, macroeconomics going completely crazy on them, and unexpected events. Because I was, by an accident, one was on September 10th of 2001, just before September 11, 2001, and one was in the September of 2008, which is when 2 weeks before Lehman Brothers collapsed. So I can tell you that forecasting just is sometimes a waste of time, because things happen that you don't know. But what is the big picture? I think the big picture is that, so we're sitting in Bulgaria, well, we're sitting in AUBG, which is in Blagoevgrad, which is in the middle of Bulgaria, not quite in the middle, but in the middle of the Balkans. And the Balkans are in the middle of something called Central and Eastern Europe, which is very linked to Western Europe, because those countries which are in the Balkans and are in the European Union are very, very, very linked to what happens in Western Europe today. About half of their exports are linked to the cycle in Western Europe. And I think because investment in many cases lags by a very short span of time the macro cycle, the indication of what happened with investment to date could be very, very indicative of what we could expect seeing in the future. So the messages from this analysis are the following. Over a relatively long period of time, which is 7 years, the level of investment defined as fixed capital formation in the equity capital of companies around Western Europe, and specifically and also Central and Eastern Europe, has been more or less consistent between, let's say, 3 to 6% of GDP. What has happened in Bulgaria is very interesting, because Bulgaria started from a level of very low investment levels in the economy relative to GDP. It spiked very high around the time of the accession of Bulgaria to the European Union. So you will see 2005, 2006 going all the way up to about 30%, which is 6 times the levels we observe in Western Europe or Central Eastern Europe as a whole. And then converged to normal levels over the last 3 years, and is now, or at least as of the end of last year, showing a little bit of revival. I don't know if the colors are clear, but this is Bulgaria, and this is Central Eastern Europe, and this is Western Europe. So this is the environment we're in today. This is the environment that most entrepreneurs like Steve, who is trying to start up companies and raise money, are operating in. And this means that Bulgaria has come out of a hype cycle. Bulgaria has come out of the illusion that the European Union will make it or break it. It didn't make it, didn't break it. And that Bulgaria is now facing exactly the same prospects as everybody else in Europe with regards to starting companies, raising capital, raising funding, or anything else that has to do with a business activity. So we are in a flat level field, I would say. Still, there is a small gap between the levels that Bulgaria tends to attract, and I Can't quite explain those gaps because I don't trust official government numbers. They always tend to be inflated. Check Argentina, for one example. And Argentina and Bulgaria have a lot in common when it comes to currency board and leadership style, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say it's tricky to compare numbers to numbers because sometimes it's apples and oranges. But relatively speaking, Bulgaria is not in a bad shape today for anyone to return here, to study here, to try to start up a business here, and even start up a business with the ambition to become a global business. Maybe if you go down one slide. So what this shows is since my organization, which is a venture capital fund, essentially investing in young companies with no revenues or very small volume of revenues, active in the technology space, information technology space, which is everything from companies which get set up to one day compete with Microsoft, compete with Google, compete with Facebook, compete with telecom company, compete with very large IT organizations, which is exactly what they do today. We try to monitor the behavior of exactly those companies. So we want to see what the competition is doing, and is there sound evidence to the fact that what they want to do globally can be done here in Bulgaria and in the region. So this is just, I guess, representative statistics indicating that the answer is yes. These companies come here, they have much bigger pockets, they take a lot longer and a lot more structured and organizational decisions as to how to invest in a market they have never been to before. And therefore, if you look at their behavior and try to analyze it, the outcome of this behavior, we believe, is very indicative to our hypothesis about a market. So what we see here is that between 2005 and now, which is the same period that we showed on the previous, we looked at in the previous slide, basically almost the who is who of the IT world has come and invested in this country, in this market. One very interesting detail is that none of them has come to invest in this market because of the market itself. Because any of these companies, Microsoft, Siemens, IBM, VMware, Experian, actually has very, very little business in this market. As an example, the revenues for either of these companies would be probably less than 1% of their global revenues. So they did not come here to seek market. So what did they come here to seek? We believe they came here to seek talent. We believe they came here to see easier market access to other markets they would want to penetrate from here. They came to take advantage of a favorable macro environment, such as inflation, stability, political stability, macro stability overall, also, of course, labor rates, and generally availability of innovation, creativity, and the ability to start something on a plan, get it done fast, efficient, and look for results. So what we believe is that this picture indicates a proof, a testimony to the fact that our hypothesis back in 2005 was correct. When we got started, there were very, very few examples. So there was IBM and Siemens, and as we started 2006, from 2006 to 2010, I think we saw the creation, the investment of probably in the excess of $200, $300 million in very high-level IT facilities, the creation of probably more than 5,000 jobs in this industry, and this is still happening. In one of these cases, this was also done through an acquisition, which is the example of October 2007 when VMware came and acquired a company which was actually managed by Steve here on the first row with the cowboy belt. So this was also an indication that something already set up on the ground could be taken on, assessed and taken on, from a risk management perspective means that the right things were done even before the big 100-pound gorilla stepped on the ground and applied their own policies and measures on how to start it from a greenfield perspective. This was encouraging. So we went ahead and we built a portfolio of 8 companies. with deployment of we raised about 30 million euros, and we invested about 25 million euros in the capital of those companies. If you maybe go one more slide. Oh, actually, I got that now. Independent. We had a very, also we had to look at the competition, right? So we had to look at who else is likely to come here, and if Steve is on the ground with his team, who else is likely to come and bid for Steve's attention? Ask Steve that it's not NEVEQ, but it's someone else who can invest and buy Steve's company. So we were not alone. I mean, in Bulgaria, as an operating team, we were alone because there was no other venture capital fund, which was encouraging. We wanted to be here and access people that way. But from global and regional perspective, we were not alone. So there were, I would say, 4 to 5 teams which had a much longer operating history dating back to 2001, 2002, which had been doing deals in the market, looking for talented entrepreneurs, good ideas. And basically, we knew we were not alone, so we needed to be very organized, fast, and very focused on what we did. Today, I would say this data is from probably 3 weeks ago. And you will see that where we ranked in terms of a player, we're maybe a mid-sized player. There are 3 or 4 funds which have much more capital under management. There were a few others which were smaller. And then if we look at the performance of those funds, which is a somewhat confidential set of data, but what I can share is that we rank today in the top 25 percentile of those funds. So the people who spend their time valuing venture fund portfolios, one versus another, and know the data behind those portfolios have ranked our fund in the top 25 of the performers in the market. So we've done relatively well. We sold one company, made profit on it, and today are in the process of selling a few more companies, as well as in the process of launching our second fund, NEVEQ 2. What is the market? I mean, what really is happening? Because sometimes millions don't mean very much. I think probably in your, how many people study marketing as a major? That's encouraging. So those of you who study marketing, but even if you don't study marketing, you know that the definition of the market is price and volume. So units times price. This is the size of the market. Maybe you can say something else to that effect, but it's units times price. So prices don't matter because these funds are based everywhere around the world, although they could invest in Bulgaria. They manage a lot of money, and sometimes the size of the fund is not indicative of its competitive position, but just in terms of numbers of how many investments were done. This is in the region. You will see that the market is actually not very big. It's not very big. So in 2007, around the time the EU expanded, there were about 125 transactions. 1 year later, which was the year when the Lehman-driven crisis happened, this went up by a factor of probably 35%, so 200-ish transactions, and then the market collapsed, like every other market in the financial market space collapsed. So in 2011, which is the last set of available data, there was a pickup, which was still half the levels of the pre-crisis years. So maybe 80 to 100 financing transactions took place in the market. I would say from just a number of transactions perspective, because we did our investments mainly in 2009 and 2010, we probably, having done 4 transactions in each year, we probably have a 5% market share by the virtue of having done 5 transactions of each of these years. Why did we invest in the crisis years, or why did we deploy most of our capital in the crisis years? It's the 2 reasons. First, and less fortunate, is that you have to help companies which are probably stuck because of various reasons. So you spend money that you didn't expect to spend. But the second is simply following a very simple rule, which is valid from early stage to late stage, to private equity, to buying companies, investing, et cetera, which is something that Warren Buffett put in one phrase, which is, when everybody is excited, I'm very scared. And when everybody is scared, I get very excited. So this is what we try to do as well, a little bit. And this is how we ended up investing most of our capital in those years. So I hope you understand a little bit of the environment, which is we operate in a subdued environment, which I do not undertake to make expectations on what will happen. I believe it's going to stay relatively flat. It's going to be very painful for some of the countries which are not stable and spend more than they earned, which is a general, I'd say, household rule, so no surprise there. In terms of the competitive environment, there are investors who have come, most of them have stayed, and more will come. And why? It's precisely because the macro dynamics hasn't really changed the profile of Bulgaria in the region. It still remains competitive from cost terms, from stability terms, or let's say most of the region remains competitive in cost and stability terms, and the people are here. And when I say this, the people are here. You are the people, so you're here, and that's what attracts these people to come and invest. From venture investing perspective, the market's coming back. So that's good news for us, and I think it's good news for you, and it's good news for AUBG, and it should be good news for everyone who wants to undertake an entrepreneurship career. And this is by stage, just one more piece of data. There's still a lot of investments, a lot of money which are going into non-seed. So seed means when you have pretty much nothing. That means you pulling up a piece of napkin and saying, I want to have an idea, but you still don't know how you're going to, what exactly the product will look like when it's ready. You don't know who will fund you. You don't know if anyone will fund you. And pretty much you have an idea and a little bit of orientation of how you're going to do it, but it's really a seed stage idea. Seed stage financing in Central Eastern Europe is small, very small. So not 10 transactions got done in 2011. Probably, I don't know, another 20 to 30 got done in 2012. So not the whole, the Europe is still very conservative when it comes to seed investing. So those are the numbers. I need to check on the time before I switch to the next subject. I have 5 more minutes. So maybe I dedicate the 5 minutes on should you become an entrepreneur? I think that's probably my personal way to approach this. What I am is I am a person who knows where to find money to put into service and support of entrepreneurs. That's the definition of what a venture capital guy is. And as such, I need to find the best entrepreneurs or the entrepreneurs with the biggest vision about something that I understand. And if I don't do it consistently, next time I will go back for money for the fund with my investors, they won't give me the money. So in order to continue my career, which I love, and I've been doing for 6 years now, I need to consistently make the right choices. Sometimes I make bad choices, but on average, my choices need to be correct, and I need to be able to take those money and then give them back in some period of time with a profit. And in the meantime, I need to find people like Steve and those of you who are sitting here and maybe do not know yet that you are going to do what Steve does, but will. I think the first big question one ought to ask themselves is what do I really love to do? What is it that I really love to do? And am I really good at something? Do I really have a passion for something that I want to do anyhow and maybe on my own? So I think the first step is look inside for passion. And could be music, could be candy, could be pets, or could be your friend, or could be their mood, or could be something. But do you have a passion that you consistently spend so much time on that it takes half of your time as your student? So I'm hoping that half of your time goes into studying. But at least, but if you have such passion, and can you identify it, and then basically, the more you find yourself spending more times on the thing you love, probably you have a passion outside of your boyfriend or girlfriend. And if that passion is, happens to be somehow connected to a business, then you're probably a potential entrepreneur. The next thing you need to do is find out whether you have a partner. And when I mean a partner, I would apply here the same criteria as the person you would want to marry. If you cannot apply the same criteria as the person you would want to marry one day, that is probably not your partner, which means they probably have a bad breath in the morning after you've been working overnight to build a spreadsheet or something. And if you can't stand that breath, you probably won't be able to stand it when it happens, when you actually are working in your room overnight to get something done. If that person doesn't tolerate your weaknesses and your failures, it's probably not going to happen either. If they're too judgmental of you, that's probably not going to happen either. Why do we want more than one person to start a company? Well, it's very, very simple, and it's very, very sad at the same time, because there's traffic here in Volgograd, and one day you cross the street and there's a crazy drunk driver and something very bad can happen. So at this stage, we want to make sure that the company that we just invested and we backed is not a one-man show, because that's a real shock. It's a shock to the founder, the co-founder. It's a shock to us. And basically, we're looking for things which have two legs, two people or two founders at least. So the first thing we look at is the entrepreneur who has an identified passion, has found a partner. And the other two things are as relevant, but we could help manage them and improve them or change them if need be. And those are an idea, which has to become a product or a service. And the next thing is the market. So those are the three basic questions. Very simple, isn't it? A person who has a friend, a product, which comes out of an idea, and a market, which is the place where this product will be sold. And then I think if you're able to sit those, map those, think about them, go to Veneta, go to your professor of whatever you're doing, and speak to the friends who are already out there in the market doing something. Check with them how this feels. Then you probably up to something, and then you can contact one of the many people who are now in Bulgaria doing the same thing to check if this is of any interest, whether you can get us curious and passionate about what you do, because your passion has to become our passion as well. That's very, very, very important. So that's the kind of that's really the basic framework. I guess I can wrap it up by saying how I ended up here myself, maybe. So I was a student at a small, not so small, but let's say a no-name university in Boston. I actually applied to AUBG, but I couldn't get in. It was the first or second year of the school. I just couldn't get in. The GMAT scores were so high. I was a Bulgarian, so what effectively became the case was I was discriminated against because there were so many smart Bulgarians that I was not one of them, so I couldn't get in. So I got a scholarship somewhere else. I ended up in Boston in this university, and one day a professor, just like Veneta, invited me to join a business case competition. So this business case competition was, they picked teams of 5 people, 2 teams, from 6 universities in Boston, and there was my school, Northeastern, there was Boston University, Babson, MIT, and I believe Harvard, so big names. And we were the underdog. So there was very, very little chance that we win this business case competition. There was a jury who were 5 CEOs from the Boston area by very, very big names from the Boston area. So this was a very, very serious thing. And we trained for 4 months every weekend on a case practice basis to go to the finals and compete. So the day came, we went there. It was very stressful. We all wanted to win. We were all facing 11 other teams, big jury, so something very, very new for us. We got locked into a room for 2 hours where we were each given a separate, we were each given the same business case, which ended with a question on one question, which basically boiled down to what do you do now that you're completely stuck with this company? And we had 2 hours, 1 hour to analyze and 1 hour to prepare a PowerPoint presentation. And then we were given 12 minutes to present it to a jury. So we did it. We came out number 1. It was great because the underdog wins. And why am I telling you this story? For 2 reasons. First of all, this story made me believe that impossible is nothing. So unless you try, you have to try. Unless you try, it's probably unlikely to happen. When you try and you believe it's not possible, even then it's possible, as long as you have a good preparation and you believe in what you do, what you want to achieve. Point number 3 is that compare a small school, no name on a global scale or even country, national level with Harvard and MIT. Well, they're certainly bigger schools and better schools by all standards, but we beat them. We beat them, and not only we beat them, but my school proceeded to beat them 12 times out of 14 competitions each consecutive year. So this kind of, I think, proves the point that you may be in the underdog school, but you can be a winner. I think it all depends on the passion, the time, and the preparation you put inside. Having won the competition, one of the jury guys was from Microsoft, so not only we won, but I ended up getting a job at Microsoft in the West Coast, and that's where I fell in love with what I do 10 years ago, and I'm back here now doing the same thing. So I guess the floor is yours now. It's a real pleasure to introduce Steve. He's very funny.
Very funny. All right, I've got one.
I got one.
Can you put up the next blinded? Thank you, Pavel. Okay, so Pavel gave you the VC perspective. I'm going to try to give you the perspective from my point of view, which sometimes might be different, sometimes similar. If I can get this to work better. All right. I want to start with a history lesson, because all too often we're supposed to learn from history, and yet somehow that knowledge and that wisdom gets forgotten and grown over. And that's a shame, because we become stupid. So I want to start with the birth of Silicon Valley. Some of you might know this story, others don't. But they didn't have such a humble beginning in Silicon Valley. You know, we think about it now as the sort of nest of birthplace of innovation, where venture capital and entrepreneurs grow and everybody's got great ideas. But it started with World War II and the war. So the United States had a choice to make: jump into the war or face a new world order. So they decided to jump into the war, but they weren't very prepared. They didn't have a war machine like the Axis power had for years and years, built and developed. So they had to do this really, really quickly, very quickly. So what did they do? They went to the best professors from MIT and Harvard and Stanford and Carnegie Mellon and all these other great universities, and they said, hey, we need you. Uncle Sam wants you. And they got them. And they said, we're going to fund all the research you need, all the money to get things like rocketry and aerodynamics and the atomic bomb and all these machines of war that they needed, radios and radars and all these things. And they put them in one place. A very inexpensive place at the time, Silicon Valley. And the researchers worked away with their teams day and night. And they created their theories and their ideas. But then those theories and ideas had to become practice. So the United States government went to business people, people like Hewlett and Packard, Allied Signal, and other large companies, and said, hey, we're going to create these massive defense contracts, huge fat billions of dollars, for you to build the stuff that these little geeks have just thought of. And you're going to work together. And they did. And they created the companies and helped the formation of these companies. And they had huge defense contracts, just piling out the money, saying, here you go, here you go, here you go, here's the researchers, here's the business guys, here's the facilities, here's the money, go. Make that rocket, make that bomber, make those turbines. That is how Silicon Valley started. And after that wasn't really the end, was it? Because after the war was won by the West, we had the Cold War. And you had years and years and years of miniaturization and military technologies that led technology, and the US government continued to fund. And that is why we have growth in Silicon Valley. That is the story of how Silicon Valley started. And it continues today. So what are the lessons we need to learn from this that we've somehow forgotten? And I say we've forgotten it because we go, ooh, let's replicate Silicon Valley in the Balkans, or in Serbia, or in wherever, in London, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm sorry. What we really need is to remember that it ain't going to happen unless all three of these little things happen. Entrepreneurship and VC are a trifecta of these elements. Active government. When I say active, I mean really active, putting heaps of money in. Active education, meaning government and education working together with a single purpose. And business. Those three things have happened for 60 years, 70 years in Silicon Valley, because the other element is time. And I'm sorry, boys and girls, we don't have that here. We're never, ever, ever going to have that here. The cold truth is that without this, which we do not have, we're not caught up on time, and we certainly don't have a government that's pumping in the cash. We certainly don't have an education system that's supportive, or up to date, or modern by any standards. So without that, the cold hard truth is that we will lose. We will continue to struggle if we try to play by the same rules. Because we don't have all the pieces, guys. We don't. We don't have a level playing field by a long shot. And we're not going to get one for a very, very long time. So if we try to play by the rules, meaning if we take the lessons learned, the best practices from Silicon Valley and entrepreneurship and VCs, and we try to apply them here, we will most likely fail. I totally believe that. A few lucky cases will happen, sure. But we're not going to create the next Facebook and the next Google if we play by the same rules. By and large. Skype, thank God, did come from Estonia. So what can we do? So this is, I think, from my perspective, the harsh reality. But what can we do? What's an area that we can focus on as an entrepreneur given this sort of environment, or lack of environment? And I'm going to go through about 6 items that I think we can do before I move on to my next stage of challenging you guys. Okay, so develop and grow with limited resources, economically speaking. This is what we can do. 1, keep in mind that funding is going to stay very lean. And when I say that, it's weird because a lot of times entrepreneurs seem to think money grows on trees. Sorry, this is a little bit. Seem to think money grows on trees, and they'll keep getting another phase, another round of funding, another round of funding. There's the seed round, the A round of VC, the B round, the C round, D round, mezzanine round, IPO round, whatever. It's going to stay lean. We have 2 seed funds in Bulgaria. We have 0 in Serbia and Macedonia, basically. We've got 1 VC fund. The money you're going to get from them is probably the only money you will ever get. So keep that in mind, because if you get funding, count your blessings. It's a rare thing to get, okay? The second thing, if you're from the VP's perspective, is fund to profitability. It sounds weird, but the money you give them should be enough to hit some major milestones, like really major milestones, like you get revenue or a customer and start making money and covering your costs. If you're from the entrepreneur's perspective, cash is king. A lot of times entrepreneurs get money from VCs and they throw wild parties and lavish whatever expenses. I think that's idiotic in this region. I think it's idiotic in general, but particularly in this region. Treat the cash like your own. Cash is king, because you won't get more funding most likely. There is a small chance you can, but to give you an example, when Pavel said there's been 94 million of investment in CEE in 2011, total investment in the region, just one of my 20 competitors in my tiny little niche, just one has had 84 million in funding in America. And this is a very niche segment, just one of my competitors. That's the kind of money they get there. And it's just not going to happen here. So for goodness sake, cash is king. Treat it like your own. I agree with Pavel about passion being required. And this is a huge thing for me. If you have passion, if you're in love with what you're going to do, you're going to go the extra mile. You're going to try harder. If you don't, if you're in it, and this is a cliche because you sit there and say, oh yeah, money's about, or business is about making money. Everyone says love what you're going to do. That's nice. It's idealistic. You can do that after you've made money. Well, we all say it because it's bloody true. We probably can't convince you. You're going to have to experience it for yourself. But from my perspective, you don't go the extra kilometer unless you really believe in what you're doing. You just don't. By that same token, copying is stupid. And you, again, won't believe me. So, for example, yes, Groupon did great. They made billions. And guess what happened? There was Groupon all over the world. There was a billion in Russia, in Prague, in wherever, and there were 83 Groupon clones in Bulgaria. Guess how many are wildly successful? Any guesses? Oh, that would be 0. Does it happen? Yes. There was one in Russia, one girl who started one, who sold it to Groupon and made a wild amount of money. And I think these cases where it happens feed the fuel that copying is such a great idea. You guys aren't going to believe me most likely, but copying is stupid. You're much better off doing something that you love in, that you like, that you're passionate about, rather than saying, oh, I can make a buck copying X. Maybe you can, if you're lucky. Most likely you'll fail and you'll be miserable because it's not your passion. Fifth, enterprise is really, really, really hard. And when I say enterprise, I come from the software side, so I mean enterprise software, but your business can be anything. Anything that takes infrastructure, anything that's big is hard because big requires a lot of cash. So I would say start small. Do things that don't require a lot of cash. And when I mean a lot of cash, like one of my competitors has 84 million in funding, right? That's a lot of cash. If you can get something that takes 1 million, 200,000, 50,000, the seed funds here go up to 200,000. There's a new fund starting that goes up to 1 million. Pavel's fund can do 2, 3 million. But if you require more than that, like biotechnology, that takes 100 million bucks, right? It's gonna be hard. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm trying. So I'm not taking my own advice here because I'm really passionate about it, but I have no illusions that it's going to be really hard, and it has been really, really hard. So anything big is hard. So I would say think about that. And I also think, from my last point, regional is genius. We all think, oh, we should sell in China. We hear it all the time from these like strategic thinkers and McKinsey and other idiotic consulting companies. Hey, you've got to be selling and thinking of these global markets, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, that's great if you had millions and millions of VC. Yes, my competitor can go have a Chinese operation, but what does that take? Flying multiple times to China, opening a Chinese company, bribing the local governor, spending at least $1 million. Well, sorry guys, don't have $1 million. The reality in the Balkans is we're working on a shoestring. Regional is where we should be focusing, not saying, oh, even if it's a social app, I don't care, because marketing is expensive, channel building is expensive. I would say regional is genius. Regional is where your passion, your excitement can shine through, when you can touch customers with stories and prospects and do sales personally or through a network of people you know. Start regional. Start local, start country, start regional. And it's genius. And if it does well, and if that passion shines through, it'll grow like Skype did. But they started regional. So those are my little lessons from entrepreneurship that I've thought about, given the difficulties of funding. And it is difficult to get funding. For those of you who aren't happy with a half full glass and say, well, I just have to have the next Google or the next whatever, Genentech, and I have to overcome all these difficulties with VC and getting out. I've got a couple ideas for you, and I'll try to run through if I have time, maybe. Okay? You have to challenge and learn, meaning you got to learn from history, you've got to learn from your own mistakes, from your own environment and others, and you've got to challenge the established thinking, the status quo. You have to. You've got to leapfrog. To radically achieve change, you got to leapfrog. One easy example, communications. What did developing countries do when they had this need to connect, when they were growing and people wanted to talk to each other, right? Did they do like the United States and Australia and the UK did? Did they build hardwired infrastructure throughout the entire country, which takes trillions? No. They said, oh, we're just going to leapfrog the entire philosophy, and we're going to put up cell towers. Cheaper, by like a factor of 100, and it works great. They don't have landlines, they got mobile. This is what China and this is what Africa did. Pretty smart. Leapfrogged. So my question to you guys is, why does technology and science move so amazingly and wonderfully fast? It does. Think about it. You guys know this. Moore's Law, Krieger's Law, moves amazingly fast. But why does management and education, the two other things of those, the elements of what we need for change, move so agonizingly and torturously slow? Why? Why is that? Let's get to it later. But I'll tell you why I think, because we're retarded. I think it's because of our belief systems. We inherit rather than create belief systems. And the weird myth and fallacy of it is that we think we're little molds of clay. We think we create our own belief systems. It's a myth of individuality and choice, but we don't. We inherit our belief systems. How many of you that grew up Republican have switched to Democrat? Or that grew up in one religion or faith have switched to another? 5%, 4%. The stuff that is ingrained within us that we've adopted sticks with us. How many education systems have really changed much? Because the teachers that grew up in it and had to suffer through it perpetuate it. This is what they've learned, this is what they're exposed to, this is what they're going to do. The business people that have grown up with it, the captains of industry, are stuck because they were exposed to this and they do the same damn thing. And we like to think we don't, but we do. So to really leapfrog is tough, because try jumping with this on your back. This is our old inherited belief systems. All right? And I think one of the big factors of why we're not changing it and why we don't question our belief systems is because we're afraid. If you're the head of Swiss Bank, whatever, HSBC, if you're the head of Microsoft, if you're the head of big company X, Y, and Z, you suffered through this, you spent your life on it. Success means what as an investment banker? Long hours to get your big bonus, never seeing your family. What does that mean? It means you've sacrificed the moments you will never get back in life. You will never see your child's first steps. You will never hear their first words. You've sacrificed that for success. You've gone through the system. To think that it could be different, that's pretty scary, because it means you've screwed up. You've lost 40 years of your life, 30 years of your life, whatever it is. You're never going to get it back, and you were wrong. You don't want to be wrong. We have an amazing way to defend our belief systems even if they're wrong. There's heaps of studies out there, sociological studies, the science shows you defend your belief systems even when they're wrong, and you inherit them. We are stuck. We stop asking why. We stop challenging ourselves. Kids do it all the time. You grow up, you become a sheep. I'm serious. This guy said it better than me. Problems cannot be solved by the same level of thinking that created them, yet that's exactly what we're trying to do. So I would say to you that if you want to shine, if you want to go beyond the regional, like I do, you want to prove a point, you want to say, I'm going to do it, even though enterprise is hard and there's little funding, but I'm going to just bang my head against the wall until I get this done. Stop being cheap. We're supposed to create leaders here, right? AUBG is about creating the leaders of the region. So stop being cheap. One thing you got to do is say, what do we have in this region, in this country? We have the ability to use our smallness and our newness to pivot and change. Pivot our thinking. Pivot who we are and how we act. Pivot our government. Change ourselves. Small is nimble. Like, I've said this example many a times. When you're a big company, an old organization, a big country, a big government, an old person, you're a big super tanker. It takes kilometers to turn around. Bulgaria and the region is a little speedboat. We should be nimble and quick. We don't have the iceberg of baggage. We don't have 250 years of market capitalism throwing an axe in our head and individualism saying collectivism is bad. We don't. So I would challenge to you guys is that if you want to shine and you want to make a company that beats the macroeconomic conditions or microeconomic conditions, you got to change the rules. Probably don't have time for all of this, including examples, but for example, culture has to be elevated. Sorry, hard to read. It basically says culture has to be elevated to the level of importance of profit. No VC or banker will probably tell you that, but to me, culture is king. The reason large companies start off cool, like Google, then become big and boring, like Google did, is because they lose the focus on culture. Microsoft had a great culture when they were a startup. Everybody wanted to work for them. Now they're considering a slow-moving giant. We lose the focus on culture. We grow too fast. We start not hiring people with a shared passion, but people because we need bodies. We need another Java programmer. That's not culture. If culture is elevated to the level of importance of profit, we keep the spirit and the passion of the company, the mission, whatever, the mantra that we want to take forward. But we don't. And that kills companies. You've got to do that. You have to put culture first. Profit comes next. HR should be banned. I've said this a lot of times, but the amount of waste, I'm absolutely serious about it. The amount of waste and overhead that goes into HR is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. And the concept that somebody else should choose my friends is ludicrous. We banned it in my company. It's been very successful. When I say HR should be banned, I also mean other pointless overhead should be banned. You've got to reestablish, why is it here? Why do we have layers of people interviewing for a position they're not going to work in, for people they're not going to work with, and for skills they don't even understand? Frankly. Secrets can't exist. The exclusivity of information creates artificial power distance. I know something you do not. Haha. Right? I have artificial power distance created. Especially in the age of the internet, when I can Google everything, we're used to getting access to information. Secrets at work basically are trying to say, no, I'm putting up Chinese walls. I'm better than you. I have a higher level than you. I have something that you don't have. Fuck you. Work and slave to get it. Go through the traditional hierarchy. Be a little sheep. Secrets are horrible. I think secrets shouldn't exist. For example, my company, everything's open. My profit, my whatever to employees. Embrace uncertainty. Those of you in risk management here, I think the human need to try to guess and create certainty is a weird fallacy. All science shows that we cannot predict anything. We can't predict better than a cat, which is on the recent news predicting a financial market. The science shows this. I can do a Q&A after this. We can bring up lots of science articles that show that predictability is a weird, innate human need, but it just can't happen. And I think the sooner we start to embrace uncertainty, the better we'll do and the more we'll thrive in business. Predictability is just impossible, and you can't manage it. So it's a bit silly. The fifth one is release control. This is another one of these weird human traits where we want to try to control something. Maybe I'm being too Buddhistic, but I think there's very little we can control. We try to confuse ourselves and convince ourselves we can. But by putting in control, we're basically, like for example, audit or procedures that are top down or central mandated. We're basically saying, you're an idiot and I don't trust you. If you're going to hire somebody, trust them and let them do it the way they think is best. The people closest to the problem are best suited to handle that problem or solve the problem or talk to the customer or create new things and innovate. If I'm telling them how to do something, I'm adding more bureaucracy. People over process, that's kind of what I was just saying. It's not that I don't believe in process, I just believe that it shouldn't be mandated by the company. Let teams and individuals create their own process and best way of working and put their passion and energy into that. Otherwise, you're basically just creating zombies. And a huge amount of needless energy. Destroy duality. So this is a really big thing for me. We have this thing, it's a lot like a lot of Western religions. Suffer now, you'll go to heaven later. You will, right? So it's okay to be poor and downtrodden because, and it's okay that the king is really rich and the governors are really rich because you're going to go to heaven later. All right? You'll be rewarded for your piousness and your suffering. It's the same thing in business. Suffer now through the crappy management or the crappy job because when you retire, you'll get to really do what you like. That's when you're going to live, when you're 60. It is. This is the duality of the workplace. This was set up during the Industrial Revolution, perpetuated by education, and it's set up so that you can basically be the slaves of somebody else and be a good little worker. Right? Do my job, bitch. I think we need to destroy it. And what I mean by that is we have to encourage people to live their lives at work. There's a huge lie that business isn't personal, and it's perpetuated by the same thing. Business is personal. We're spending 8, 10, 12 hours of our lives every single day, plus the commute, at work. Tell me it's not personal? You kidding me? Who the hell said that? Business is intimately personal. And because it's intimately personal, I talk a lot about getting a sense of mastery and skill and relevance at work. But I really believe we need to experience story at work. That everybody has need to create their own story and develop a story. And the older we get, the more we want to have a story that isn't just a story of me or me and a partner, but it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's my society, my community, my neighborhood, my world, whatever. We want to leave a legacy. We understand there is no legacy of one. We need a team. We need to spread out, and we need to infect people. And I think if you wait and make people live their story and create their story when they're 60, it's too late. If you do that at work and give them opportunities to incorporate things about their life that they like, hobbies, skills, whatever it is, while they're working, then you have true happiness at work. Then you have people that are truly dedicated to what they want to do, who are keenly interested in their team, the people at work, their community, their product, their service, whatever. You make a passionate product, you give people true freedom and sense of purpose and help them live their story at work, you will thrive. So I'm big on that one lately. So my whole point to you guys is rules are meant to be broken, and you guys are meant to be leaders, so stop being sheep. If you play by the rules that we've been given, we don't have a level playing field. We just don't, guys. That's the history, and don't be an idiot and don't not learn from it. Learn from our history and understand that we can't do the same thing. It's just idiotic. You're leaders, be a leader. Don't copy. Innovate. Come up with some fresh ideas. I don't have time for this example, so I'll just skip right over it, but it's a European example. So in summary, lemmings are idiots. Redefine what success means. Success is that people are happy. Small is good. So if you create a small company and you're sharing these stories, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're a small, profitable company, enjoying your work, the people love it, you're impacting your community, and your customers are happy, dude, there's nothing wrong with that. That is successful. There's heaps of 200 company Mittelstands in Germany that are awesome company, like knife makers and laser makers and fine cut die makers that aren't Microsoft or whatever, some big company, but ridiculously happy, cool little things. So this concept that big has to be better, just redefine it. Small can be really cool and successful. Ask why and challenge everything. Children know how to do that. Maybe we need to get out there and learn from them because we've obviously forgotten it. We're too afraid anymore to challenge our own belief systems. It's just too scary, and that holds us back massively. So I would say ask why at least 3 times on any single process. Why am I doing that? Have I inherited that, or am I doing that? Is it proper for me, my team, my company, my environment now? Or am I doing it because it's best practice and McKinsey wrote it in a little book somewhere? 3, I said this business is personal. Create, live, and share your own story and encourage others to do that. By doing that, motivation, purpose, a real product that's fantastic, loving customers, and I mean that truly, that's when it thrives. And then lastly, there is no box. This whole idiotic thing of think in the box or out of the box, dude, get rid of the box. Don't constrain yourself one way or another. No, I'm serious. You've got to deconstruct everything. Fundamentally, think about it. There is no box. Don't listen to McKinsey. Don't copy. Don't benchmark from others. Go back and redefine within yourself and try the crazy ideas. Don't think out of the box or in the box. Screw the box. All right, there we go. Pavel, if I could invite you back up for Q&A. This thing was really weirdly positioned. See, some box thinker thought of this. I don't know. Sorry for swearing to those of you who don't like swearing.
A couple of questions because we are a little bit.
I told you it's funny, right?
Right, Nikolai.
I have a question for both of you actually. Thank you for the great presentations. Okay, please send that. My first question is for Steve. Most of us are having told our lives that we should work, find a job after we graduate. My question to you is, in the long term, is it safer being our age to be an entrepreneur or to be an employee?
I think it depends. I think it depends on your risk tolerance and your desire to do something. I mean, the big companies give you the safety and leverage of a large company. You have lots of resources. So if you want to live a mediocre, boring life, you should go work for a big company. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm really sort of anti-big company. Now, there's a lot of people that have great careers and enjoy that. It's what your comfort level is. I mean, safer. I think, personally, if I were you, now's the time to fail because big deal, right? You don't have 2 kids and, a dog and a cat sitting there waiting for you to come home and feed them, right? No, seriously, right? So fail fast, fail early.
And my second question is about the fund, NEVEQ. You mentioned that you raised 30 million euro, and then you also made a reference that you have to go back and raise money again for NEVEQ too. How does the process of raising money for venture fund in our region work?
You don't want to know that.
Hard work, lots of flights. I can answer for him.
Had to convince the government to, well, the European government to do it. Steve is right. It's very hard to raise money here. It's not impossible, though. I think there is probably close to another 100 million coming to the ecosystem, so I will be less pessimistic on that one.
Okay, all that FDI, frankly, from an entrepreneur perspective, let's think about the economics of this. It sucks, short and medium term. You know why? Because it's from big companies who are doing what? Stealing your potential employees. They've got, what, VMware is doing, what, 40 billion in revenue?
Are you afraid?
Well, basically, if you're sitting there as an entrepreneur and you've got 3,000 levs to pay for a salary for a senior person or whatever it is, and they've got 10,000 levs or 9,000 levs, yeah, that does suck.
But you're so, I mean, it's fun to be with you, so it's not all about the money, is it?
Here's what I see. This is why I said short and medium term. I think short and medium term, it is about the money for a lot of people, especially you guys. That's, you know, you can catch whatever, 4,000 or 5,000. It's really exciting. You're going to go do it because that's a lot of cash. Where we see, what I've seen happen is that junior and mid-level people and early seniors stay at the large companies because they catch the big cash. But then once they get more confidence, they've been there for a while and they realize it's bureaucratic and it's not so challenging anymore, and they're at a certain level of maturity in their career or profession, they jump ship. So I think long term it's good for Bulgaria to have all this FDI because you'll see these senior people leaving and either founding their own companies or becoming co-founders. Short and medium term, it means if you're starting a company, you're just going to be a bitch to compete and hire and attract talent. So all this FDI to other big companies, I don't care about it. It's not VC. It's not FDI coming in for you. It's so big companies can basically have a low-cost base. That's the reality of it.
And one of your points were that there should be less control in the companies, and I was talking about exactly the same with my former employer, and I was saying that there should be less control. Well, his opinion was that it's true if you employ the professional, but if you're employing like somebody like I am, the student, there should be like a controlling point.
Got you on that one. Okay, so two things. What you see, first of all, is lack of culture. So large companies grow, they just need people, so they create huge policy manuals and procedures so they can take an idiotic trained monkey and get them through the procedure to do whatever it is to do. So they're not hiring anymore like they used to. They're hiring an underskilled person, throwing a procedure at them and says, follow this and you'll be able to do it. And I don't agree with that because they're hiring them in mass, right? So big company hiring, whatever. In the case of an intern, for example, so the reason I have no HR, one of the reasons besides it being idiotic, is that when a person hires the new hire themselves, and so we have interns and juniors that aren't good, okay? When they make that choice to hire them, like, because we know we need them, we need fresh blood, we need new ideas, we need new passion, they become innately responsible. Like, for some reason, we have this idea that personal responsibility is bad anymore. Like, it is. So we don't want to be personally responsible for anything, but personal responsibility has to come back. So when one of my senior developers hires a person, like a junior, they put a lot more effort training and teaching that person. So I think it's silly to try to say, oh, we need control because we're hiring unqualified people. Well, don't hire unqualified people, you idiot, okay? Because all those controls cost a lot of money and lower quality and lower customer service. So then don't hire them. Or hire them slower and actually coach and train them and give them some individual-like training, and they'll shine most likely. So what they're really doing is hiring people to be robots and keeping them as robots.
How long did you work for a big company before you became who you are?
I've worked for a big company for probably 2 years.
So,
And I did my MBA, and I bought into all the MBA crap, by the way, and then slowly realized I was wrong. Okay, more, come on.
We have two questions here at the front.
What does it take
No, these guys
What does it take for VCs or HP to invest outside of Seoul? For IT businesses, I mean.
VCs or for?
Or for HP or for big, I mean, there are two HP centers in Sofia.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I gave the examples of the big companies not because they're representative in any way, shape, or form of the FDI, but just because they go through a serious process to decide something is good for them here. And yes, they still programmers, but such is life. I mean, it's a fair game. So
not really.
I think they do it. So they're probably, I would say, 10%-ish of what HP type stuff happens outside of Sofia. So it's still small. But I think, and again, to disagree with Steve on one point, which is how Silicon Valley started. I think it started because John Stanford really liked the path between the entrance of Stanford University down to Stanford University, so he put the palm trees from Hawaii, and he started Stanford University. So I don't know if had it not been for the US government money, the valley would never start, but I know if it had not been for Stanford, the valley would definitely never start. That's my point of view. So I think AUBG, I don't know, my personal vision is that this could be a valley one day. I don't know if it's Silicon Valley, but I think, having a couple of thousand people who are very ambitious and they are ideally the best of where they come from is a start. And I think companies go and investors go where they have the people. So I think it's about, the first example being built and the second example being built, and then it will happen over time. So I can't tell you if we were able to find a small company here, we would invest in it. I think we'll just apply the same criteria. Do you have passion? Do you have a good idea? And what's your market? So from that perspective, it doesn't really matter where you're based. Can you build a team and scale it? Steve, would you not put your company near AUBG?
I don't care.
Maybe yes, maybe not.
Like company here?
Yeah. Would you not start a company near a university campus in somewhere not in Sofia, if the people you have access to are good people? Okay, so here's the answer. Would I fund that company? Well, if Steve's running it, absolutely. So that answers the first question. As to HP, well then I'll take a step back. And if we're going to put a company here at AUBG, we better make sure HP never comes anywhere near, because then we have to compete with them for the people. So I agree with you. It's a joke.
Go ahead, mate. Go ahead. I wanted these guys to hear you.
So I have a question. You said that copying is stupid, but for example, there are much more developed countries compared, for example, to Bulgaria. And if there is a good viable idea, good viable business which has been enacted in states, can we is it prospectable to copy, to adopt the business model?
Of course you can. We had 80 people adopt Groupon's business model here. And you will. Because you won't learn from this. So yes, absolutely you can. There's one good thing I like about copying, and if you look at even most of the companies here that are tech companies, they're copying some pattern. Probably they'll fail, but the good thing is that they're going to get it out of their system, and they'll fail early and fast. They'll do it. They'll say, "Oh gosh, that wasn't the panacea I thought it was going to be," and then they're going to mature in their thinking and in their management and their style and their technology and approach and all these things. And I have a feeling their next business will be better. There's some things I don't mind, like the difference between copying and modeling might be semantic, cool hat. But there's some things that you can model. I mean, some ideas that are really good that you've seen that work somewhere and you bring them in. But when you just copy Groupon or you copy Facebook or you copy whatever the next buzz is, it's just, yes, you can. But will you be successful? 2%, 1%?
Turn it on.
I don't think it's black and white. I think it's definitely bad to start by copying, just because you probably get wiped out. Somebody who the very person who you copied from, probably come up with some better copy of it. I don't think copying I think copying sometimes could lead to learning, but just don't count on it. And if you have to make a pivot some point in your life, you have to look at what the others do. Whether you copy it or not is a very personal, ethical decision, I guess. And here again, I go back because I didn't answer, I believe, your question on is it better to start in a big company or a small company, because it has to do with the same concept. I think, it's very personal. It's a very, very personal decision. I definitely think if you start with a good big company, you can learn some basic skills like you learn at university or you learn at sports academy. No Olympic champion just wakes up in one morning and goes and wins the gold medal. They go to a good coach. So I think whether you find a good coach, I think you need a good coach, right? So if you're lucky to find a good coach in a big company, go for it. And also don't be afraid. Maybe you do, maybe you don't.
We're taking just 2 more questions, and I'll ask for very short answers. One up there and one over here. Go, stand up, please.
Wow.
I'm gonna speak loud. So continual speaking, you say the job is stupid, but it's just because you think it's not working out most of the time. Like I'm coming from Russia, and there guys copied Facebook and copied Google, and now Facebook and Google cannot outperform the local companies.
Yeah.
So
okay.
do you think if you do get success and you better and then you cannot beat you, is it still stupid because it's just essentially wrong?
Listen, Nate.
Or it's because it's not gonna work out?
It's not working. Anyway, so, okay, in a big market like Russia, or it also happened in China, you had 100 copiers and finally Yandex won. Yes, this is why I said one of them is gonna actually make money and everybody else is gonna go, ooh, great idea, let's be lemmings. Yes, Yandex did fine, great. You've got 150 or whatever million people, they've got a lot of money there. Yes, in that market, one of them did well. Yes, one sold to Groupon and made a lot of money. In a smaller regional market like this, how many?
You can always end up being.
You could, right. Well, why not just do something you love? I mean, yes, go ahead, by all means, try to copy one. I mean, that's what I said. No one's going to believe me anyway, because you hear these little stories that are like little, these little mythologies like, ooh, like the Holy Grail, that Yandex made it and whatever that Groupon copycat made it, so I'm going to make it too. Go ahead, whatever. I just think it's a waste of time and energy, and you should be putting that into something you love and you care about, because when you're copying something else, I mean, dude, if someone's drawing a snimka, a picture, whatever, and you just, what am I going to draw? And you draw theirs. Is it going to be as good? No. Like, if I'm in love with her, and he's like, well, I want to be in love with somebody, I'm going to be in love with her. Is his love going to be as deep as mine? No. It's just stupid. It's not.
Okay, and we have one final question.
No. It's not working anyway. Okay, then what I get from your conversation from our conversation means that you prefer opening new markets without existing demand right now, rather than trying to outperform other competitors on a market that already has pretty substantial demand.
Totally. From my perspective, okay. I don't know.
I do too.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the point where we...
Or find a new twist.
Thank you.
We're going to keep talking. I'm just kidding.
Yes, and this is what people...
This program is brought to you by AUBGTalks. For more, please visit us at aubg.bg/talks.